Bills Mafia on tonight's special edition of the Air Raid Hour pregame. We will be breaking down what to expect from the Bills tonight as they take on the division rival Miami Dolphins on Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. We'll have injury updates, key matchups, our pregame superlatives, all that and more coming up. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Air Raid Hour Buffalo Bills pregame show brought to you by the Cover One Sports Network. And we got a whole bunch of people rolling into the comment section. So gonna oblige the comment section here early. RJ Melville coming in saying it's game day. Please make me feel better about this game. A lot of data is pointing to a Finns blowout. I hope the data is wrong. Jason M coming in saying, good evening, boys. Thursday games are always so weird. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not even like in a mental place for the Buffalo Bills to play football tonight. But we will power through. And then Kelly Gibson coming in saying, you guys are great. Mandatory listen. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Dave, your anxiety index, where are we at tonight? 1 out of 10, 10 being full blown panic mode. Where are we at right now?
Panic mode. Panic's not the right word. I would say anxiety is at a 10. Okay.
Mhm.
The reason I say that is because it's an early season divisional game. I'm not in the comfort of my normal sort of Monday or Sunday, 1 p.m., like have the sort of weekend buffer, so to speak. Like we're in the middle of the work week. We're in the middle of the week. We're the first game of the slate this week. We're the only game on tonight. We're the only game on right now, obviously. And so all the eyeballs are going to be on Bills Dolphins tonight. A lot of people talking about that Dolphins come from behind win against Jacksonville last week, rightfully so. Tyreek, Jaylen, Waddle both had good games. I mean, the Dolphins have been, looking for any kind of reason to spoil the party that the Bills have had against this team for the better part of the last 3 to 4 seasons, right? Or really since Josh Allen's been the quarterback. So to me, like this game's in Miami, but I think there is a lot of pressure on the Bills. And every time there's been pressure on the Bills in these types of games, have mattered against the Dolphins. The late game 2 years ago in the winter that the Bills needed to, get back into the playoff mix. In the game last year, week 18, they needed to win. They've risen to the occasion. So can they do that again tonight? Let's hope they can.
Yeah, it's going to be, we talked about the advantage being, hey, we don't have to play Miami on a Sunday afternoon. It's not going to be all that hot. The weather at kickoff is going to be 80s and cloudy, but there has been heavy rain all day, remnants of Hurricane Francine. That could affect the playing surface at Hard Rock Stadium. So we could see that come into effect at some point tonight. As for the injuries in tonight's matchup, the Dolphins will be without Raheem Mostert, without Malik Washington. Devon Achane is questionable with an ankle sprain. It's looking like he's going to play, but who knows how effective a speedy running back is going to be on an ankle sprain. And then for the Buffalo Bills, Taron Johnson is out. Dwayne Smoot is out. Kingsley Jonathan has been elevated from the practice squad. Thoughts on the weather, thoughts on the injuries, anything that you think is going to play a major factor in tonight's game?
Well, I will say this, right? I mean, and you put a tweet out right before the show started that it certainly looks like the rain is going to stop before the game starts, but that field is natural grass, as you pointed out. So it's going to be sloppy, I think, on the field. I mean, this is the NFL, so they will do as much as they can to make sure that field is ready to go, as good as it can be before game time. But I don't think it's going to impact too much. You might see a slip here or there, but I don't think it will have too much of an impact on the game if, in fact, the rain does stop before game time. It's really just going to be a little bit soggy. I think they'll adjust the cleats that they need for that. But you're right. The injuries, I think Taron Johnson's a big loss. As good as Cam Lewis played last week against the Cardinals, he's going to have to play even better probably tonight against the Dolphins. And then, yeah, you mentioned Mostert out for the Dolphins. Achane questionable with that ankle, probably going to play. So it looks like it's going to be Jeff Wilson maybe leading the way for the Dolphins on the ground. And it may also mean that it's leaning, and we've seen some reports that Jaylen Wright will be active tonight for the Dolphins as
your
well.
boy.
Yeah.
He's gonna stab you right through the heart tonight, maybe.
Probably. So it's big fan of his in the pre-draft process.
Yeah, so that'll be really interesting to see how all of that plays out. At some point during this pregame, the Buffalo Bills inactives list, the Miami Dolphins inactive list will drop. So we will acknowledge that when it does drop, and just shoot us a little maybe notice in the comment section when that information does drop, and we will pull it up and discuss it. But first thing we're going to talk about this evening is how the Buffalo Bills offense matches up against this Miami Dolphins defense. New defensive coordinator and Anthony Weaver, former Baltimore Raven defender, formerly of the Buffalo Bills on Rex Ryan's staff years ago. Up front, they lost Wilkins, right? But they have Zach Sealer, who is a mainstay up front, very, very good football player. After that, they have Calais Campbell, but it's a heavy rotation. Campbell's 38 years old, and there's a bunch of just guys that they rotate in and out up front. Their pass rush is obviously led by Jaylen Phillips. Bradley Chubb on IR means you're going to see a heavy dose of Emmanuel Ogbah and the rookie Chop Robinson. I believe Mo Kamara was inactive last week. I don't know if we'll see him this week. Linebackers David Long Jr. and Jordan Brooks played every snap for the Dolphins defense last week against the Jaguars, so you can expect them in the middle of that defense. And then in the secondary, you got Jalen Ramsey, you got Fuller, Kahoo, Javon Holland, and Jordan Poyer. Weaver mentioned a lot this offseason about going into these 3 safety looks, and they have Marcus May on the bench, but they only utilized it on 3 plays last week against the Jaguars. So it'll be really interesting to see if maybe that's something they try and pull out this week. But what are your thoughts on this Miami Dolphins defense?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's only been 1 game so far, but held the Jags to only 267 yards offense. Last week, they sacked Trevor Lawrence 3 times. Phillips had a sack. Ogbah had a sack. Calais Campbell, I think, had a sack as well. Held the Jags to only 2 for 10 on 3rd downs and an 0 for 1 on 4th down. So when the Dolphins defense, for the most part, needed to show up last week against the Jags, they did. They got out of that hole. They were down 14-0 early, ended up winning the game 17-14 because the Jags just couldn't get it going offensively after the Dolphins defense settled in.
Such a fraudulent team every year, man. They're just pathetic.
Who, Jacksonville?
Yeah, and we always lose to them. I don't.
Hey, we got them next week. So. Yeah, but no, I think this Dolphins defense will be better than what we've maybe seen the last couple times we've played this team. Obviously, Jordan Poyer is aging, but there's still going to be some maybe tricks he has up his sleeve to kind of share with this defense around, what Josh Allen likes to do, tendencies, things of that nature. So I think that you could end up seeing it kind of maybe play out similarly to how this Dolphins team played the Bills in Week 18 last year. I do think that this is maybe the best version of the Dolphins defense we've seen under Mike McDaniel. And I don't think that even without Bradley Chubb, that's much of an overstatement because they've added pieces, right? And they've got depth, and their linebackers are good, like you mentioned. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be one of those like last year where we saw the Bills put up 40 plus points in that week, whatever it was, week 4 game. And then I think it's going to be more like what we saw at the end of the season last year. So I don't say it's an easy matchup, but the Bills should be up for the task.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Eric Wood made a comment on X today. He was like, everyone's talking about Christian Wilkins being gone and how that's in the Bills' favor, but the Bills have really dominated this Dolphins defense with Christian Wilkins. And he's like, one could even argue Christian Wilkins brought out the best in Josh Allen because he pissed him off so much. So it'll be really interesting to see if that defense is a little bit more subdued without Christian Wilkins and what effect that has on Josh Allen. And you mentioned Jordan Poyer, and Sean McDermott made a really interesting comment this week when speaking to the media, and they asked him obviously about Jordan Poyer, and he said, he's got the playbook. He's got it. He has the playbook. That was Sean McDermott's commentary really on Jordan Poyer. Josh Allen in his career versus Miami in the regular season, 10-2 with 3,363 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 638 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns, plus that 11th playoff win, which is the most important of them all. quite literally, Josh Allen has dominated the Miami Dolphins in his career thus far. Does Jordan Poyer being on the other side of this give you any pause for concern that the Miami Dolphins can finally slow down Josh Allen?
It doesn't move the needle a ton. It does
Mhm.
it's certainly an advantage for the Dolphins. Like, you can't say like, oh, having Jordan Poyer is a negative for them, right? I don't think it's fair to say that, but I think this is a new season. I mean, yes, I'm influenced by Anthony Weaver. I like him as a defensive coordinator, and it's probably swayed my opinion of their defense, but also it's a new Bills offense with a lot of new faces. So I think it's maybe going to be the combination of the Bills or of the Dolphins defense with Poyer having the playbook, new defensive coordinator, and the Bills also with a new, for the first full season, new offensive coordinator and a lot of
Mhm.
new faces on offense. So those two things combined are maybe what gives me the slightest pause, but I don't think it's necessarily standalone Jordan Poyer on in a vacuum that's going to give me a ton of pause. I think it's a lot of these factors
Mhm.
kind of combined, which make it questionable as a bit of a wild card.
Yeah, I like the comment from Karubin coming in saying, I don't think players move the needle. We have Mike White. So don't you worry. We got that offensive playbook from the Miami Dolphins. Let's take a look at this Miami Dolphins defense specifically and talk about how this week, because this is going to be really a week to week offense for the Buffalo Bills. How are we specifically going to attack this Miami defense? What is Joe Brady going to look at on paper? What's he going to look at on film from last week against Jacksonville and say to himself, this is how we want to go about attacking this iteration of the Miami Dolphins defense?
Well, I mean, you mentioned no Christian Wilkins. I think you take a look at what the Jaguars were able to do last
Mhm.
week. I mean, Trevor Lawrence only attempted 21 passes, Jags 26 attempts on the ground, 12 attempts each from Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. Tank Bigsby, the bigger of the two backs, fared better than Travis
Yep.
Etienne on the ground, averaging 6.1 a carry. So maybe Joe Brady goes into his bag a little bit and starts to pull out a little bit more Ray Davis in this game to complement James Cook on
Mhm.
the ground. We saw a couple, in very limited, right, action. We did see a couple um, glimpses of what Ray Davis could give
Yeah.
you in the passing game, but also on that first run he had
Mhm.
downhill, inviting contact. That could be a nice compliment tonight to a James Cook, who I expect we're going to see another heavy dose of him, by the way. So if I'm the Bills and I'm looking at this Dolphins defense, not a ton that worries me up the middle necessarily. If I'm looking
Mhm.
to establish my run game with, both Ray Davis and James Cook, you've got Zach Seiler in there, who I do like.
Mhm.
You mentioned him; he's a good player, and Campbell, who's a bit of a tweener edge inside type of guy, but the Bills should be able to, I think, run the ball
Yeah.
sort of at this Dolphins defense. And I think that maybe this week you do see more than just the 3 attempts you saw from Ray Davis on the ground last week. Obviously, with the Bills playing catch up
Mhm.
for some of last week, they couldn't maybe necessarily do that. But maybe this is the week that you see a little bit more Ray Davis.
Yeah, you mentioned the Jaguars last week and their success on the ground, 26 carries for 128 yards. It's 5 yards per carry that they had on the ground. They had success controlling the line of scrimmage and running it out of 12 personnel. So I think Joe Brady really is going to continue a balanced approach with an emphasis on this bully personnel. I'm going to coin a new term here, bully personnel. That's that 12 personnel the Buffalo Bills like to get in with Knox and Kincaid and having Coleman and Hollins on the field. When those big boys are on the field, that's
Mm,
really bully personnel for the Buffalo Bills. But I do think you're going to see more variance on first down, which was a second half issue for the Buffalo Bills last week. I think you're going to see them use more of Curtis Samuel this week, more motion, more eye candy. And I think you're going to need more play action than you had last week. Maybe they were holding it back against Arizona, and that was something that was intentional because they were trying to maybe hide it or catch Miami off guard this week with their use of play action. I think the Buffalo Bills are still going to try to control this game on the ground, but I do think they will mix in a little bit more of the passing game than they did last week. Josh Allen, I don't think he's going to go under 25 passing attempts again, but I
Probably
do
not.
think it might be under 30, right? It could come somewhere in that 25 to 30 range. So I do think once again, you're going to see a balanced approach from this Buffalo Bills offense, and that's the correct approach. Like in my opinion, this is the way the NFL is going, and until defenses then react to this more balanced approach, it's going to be very few and far between that you're going to see Josh Allen chucking the rock outside of the Buffalo Bills down 40 times a game.
Yeah, I mean, in some of the best performances, again, like the NFL may be trending to this. The balance
Mhm.
is key. Some of the best performances from a week ago, you saw the Texans with Joe Mixon running all over the yard. Even guys like Alvin Kamara on the Saints, who aren't necessarily known for a high volume rushing. I know it was the Panthers, but he's getting close to 20 attempts. These teams, a lot of these teams that had big success in week one were running the ball effectively, and that includes the Buffalo Bills with James Cook. And they need to, yeah, more variance on first down. I totally agree with that. I think the balance is key because this is a team personnel wise that is like, I think more geared towards having a
Mhm.
balanced offense than it necessarily is having, oh, super pass heavy or super run heavy. Now, Josh Allen's going to be the X factor in this with his legs, right? Whether that's off script plays, running the ball, or off script plays, throwing it down the field. And that's sort of that sort of, I guess, star factor when you consider like what's going to kind of tip the balance to the Bills' favor. You have the Josh Allen effect there,
Mhm.
but I do think this team is structured in a way that lends itself to being a bit more balanced. And like, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that we will continue to see that. I don't know if we'll see, last week I said under 25 pass attempts for Allen. I don't
Mhm.
think it's going to be under 30 tonight, but maybe you're right. 25 to 30, that seems
Yeah.
like a like reasonable
Mhm.
sort of range to predict.
Here's an interesting thing that I kind of want to talk about, not really in the show notes, but James Cook had 19 carries last week. And honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, that kind of took me off guard. Like, I know that James Cook is going to be a big part of this offense this year, but I really did think that they were going to try to maybe limit him to like the 15, 16 carry a game range. And I thought they were going to allow Ty Johnson and Ray Davis to push like double digit carries and really have like a 75-25-esque type of split. And that really just didn't occur between Ty Johnson, who got hurt, and Ray Davis. There were 5 carries and James Cook had 19. Over under 18 carries for James Cook today.
18, I'll say over. I think he's going to be around 20
Mhm.
tonight. But I also think that you could see Ray Davis around, you know, 5 to 10, 7 to
Yeah.
10. I think the Bills are going to run more plays offensively this week.
Mhm.
I think that yeah, I'll say over 18.
Yeah.
I think that's
That-
probably longer odds,
yeah.
but I don't know, just something I feel
And
like that will be the Bills' best chance for success.
And that's a really good point. Maybe the Buffalo Bills just didn't have enough possessions last week for them to give James Cook a breather. They just didn't need to, like, or see the need to, because of the time of possession in which the Cardinals dominated in that first half. So that's a really interesting point that you make there. Any other thoughts on the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Dolphins defense and how they match up this week?
Well, I know you had it in the show notes, but we probably should talk a little bit about Curtis Samuel, right? And sort
Mhm.
of what's going on with him. Is he going to touch the ball more tonight than he did in that Cardinals game? Was that more of a game plan situation? Was it more injury related? Are they still trying to work him back, even though he hasn't been on the injury report? There's a long break now between this game and the next week. So what does that mean for
Mhm.
Curtis Samuel tonight? And then I'd like to see them sort of open it up a little bit to find creative ways to get Dalton Kincaid involved. He had the really nice sort of catch and little run for a first down last week, but that was all he did, right?
Mhm.
So I guess tonight I'm looking for, yep, last week was a good debut for Keon
Yeah.
Coleman. Khalil Shakir was probably the most talked about Bills offensive player outside of James Cook and Josh Allen. Tonight, are we going to see more of the
Mhm.
presumed 2 biggest stars, I'll say, of the Bills offense in the
Yeah.
receiving side in Dalton Kincaid and Curtis Samuel? That's gonna be something I'm gonna be looking out for.
Yeah, I mean, in this wide receiver sort of by committee approach and this like this selfless everybody eats approach, like that sort of makes our job a little bit easier for wild card player of the week because it's kind of just like who's stepping up this week. Like that's like the challenge with our wild card player of the week is who's the receiver that's going to step up this week? Who's the offensive skill position player that's going to step up this week? And I think we're going to get a lot of answers on Curtis Samuel this week. Like if he plays a lot, clearly we were saving him last week for Miami and letting him rest that turf toe a little bit. If he still is in the very low end of the snap count like he was last week, well, clearly maybe he's more hurt than the Buffalo Bills are letting on. And maybe they're trying to get him that 2 weeks mostly breather until you get to that long rest before the Jacksonville game. Maybe he's like this for the whole first month of the season. Who knows? So it's going to be really interesting. And I think one of the first things I'm going to do when this game is over is I'm going to compare not the target share, but the snap share between the receivers in the room, because I think it did catch us a little off guard that Keon Coleman led all receivers in snaps last week and that Matt Collins was number 2, but then maybe it really shouldn't have because of the emphasis on running the football. So it'll be interesting to see how those splits turn out this week. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about the defense, which was on its heels early in the football game and then had themselves quite a second half against the Arizona Cardinals. The Buffalo Bills have had so much success the last couple of years against Tua and the Dolphins by flustering Tua, forcing him into his second read by taking his first read away, utilizing the disguise coverages, which Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer just did so well for Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier in this defense. Do they have the dogs, though, tonight? Based on many factors, right? The short week, Molana when Johnson being out, Hyde and Poyer no longer being here. Do the Bills have the dogs to run the same game plan that they have utilized to hold Tua and these playmakers at bay?
Well, to be honest, I think it starts on early downs, right? I think that if the Bills can be successful and we're sort of stopping the run on early downs, Mostert's not going to be in. We know he's out. Achane may be hobbled by that ankle, so it'll be maybe up to the Bills to key on Jeff Wilson on early downs. Like, so you would think, and the Bills did a decent job when you looked at the end of the day, sort of how they held the Cardinals from a rushing standpoint. They actually did a pretty good job on a yards per carry basis overall against the Cardinals. So I think if the Bills defense can find some success on early downs and stopping that Dolphins run game, because honestly, the Jags did a pretty good job in stopping that Dolphins run game as well. Held the Dolphins to pretty low yards per carry. Mostert wasn't super effective on the ground. Achane was more effective through the air. The Dolphins, where they hurt them was in the passing game, and they still only allowed 20 points. So I think ultimately the Bills, if they can take something away from that week 1 game Dolphins had against Jacksonville, it's that, hey, let's stop the run. Tua may get his yards, and Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle may get their games. But if you can keep this Dolphins team to 17 to 20 points like the Jags did in a situation where they were able to stop the Dolphins ground game pretty effectively, I think a lot of Bills fans would sign up for that. If you could say, hey, the Dolphins are only going to score 17 to 20 points tonight, we'd have a really good chance. The Bills would have a really good chance to win the game if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, that could honestly be like the philosophical game plan going in. Let's let them go on these long plotting drives. Let's make sure that we go on some long drives and score some points as well. And let it be 17-17, and let's get the last possession and go for the win. Right. So that could be something the Buffalo Bills are looking to do is sort of a similar game plan last week to the Arizona Cardinals. And just, that was essentially one of the things in my notes here is they allowed Arizona to have whatever they wanted underneath it in the ground game last week. Listening to Jonathan Gannon speak, he was like, I'm not mad at my offensive coordinator. I'm not mad at my quarterback, dude. They took what the Buffalo Bills defense gave us. They were dropping back into cloud coverage just the entire game. Do you think, and you've sort of hinted at this already, but do you think we see more of that given the speed at wideout that Miami has in Hill and Waddle and the injuries that they have at running back with Mostert out and Achane probably playing on one leg, and Tua is mobile, but he doesn't really like to run. So do you think the Buffalo Bills are just going to give up the underneath stuff, try to tackle well, and not let this Miami team get them east-west or get them north-south, like in terms of explosives down the field?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of it will start with the front four, right? Gregory Rousseau, the 3 sacks last week. Ed Oliver. I watched the game a couple times back, and I thought Ed Oliver actually was getting some good penetration. It's not going to show up in the box score, but it looked like he was getting some pretty good penetration throughout most of that game. So this Dolphins offensive line, they lost horses. We know that in the offseason. Hunt's gone. This is an area, a matchup specifically, sort of when you kind of dive into the individual levels of the defense, I think the Bills should have an advantage of their defensive line against Miami's offensive line. And so if that means that the Bills can get away with starting the pressure or starting their early downs and going into passing downs with only 4 guys rushing, then I think they will have a good chance to have success. And like you said, Tua is not the runner that Kyler was. We saw Kyler rip off a couple good runs, escape some pressure. Tua's not as mobile as Kyler, and we saw, Rousseau able to get his hands in and trip Kyler Murray. We saw Von Miller be able to push the right tackle back and kind of trip Kyler Murray. Like, that should be something the Bills have success again tonight doing. The one thing that you would say is that Kyler Murray definitely holds the ball longer than Tua. So,
Yeah.
like Tua is one of the quickest releases, one of the guys that gets the ball out fastest of any quarterback in the NFL. That
Mhm.
will be a contrast from what we saw from Kyler Murray last week, who did hold the ball at times, and then was able to run. So Tua is going to hope that his guys first read, second read, those guys are there for him. So,
Mhm.
um, to me, I don't know how much of it's going to be underneath or how much of it's going to be kind of fall honestly on the shoulders of Christian
Yeah.
Benford and Rasul Douglas in this game
Yeah.
versus the underneath.
And those two safeties too, Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, this is a real test for them because it's always been, and Terrell Bernard too, to an extent, I think as well, because they have always, with Hyde and Poyer and when Tremaine was here and when Matt Milano was healthy, just so many guys on the same page, Taron Johnson, just so many guys on the same page, communicating pre-snap, figuring out where Tua was going with that ball first and jumping it and making sure he was forced off of his spot and he was forced to pivot and go and look at that second and the third read.
Yep.
That communication wasn't there in the first half. It got better in the second half, but also pressuring Kyler allowed them to get a little bit or to ease the lack of communication or the struggles in communicating last week. Are they going to be able to recreate that this week? Do they go dime and bring Jamarcus Ingram onto the field or activate Cole Bishop and try to play Cole Bishop a little bit more? But then again, then you're giving way to Devon Achane and you're giving away to Jeff Wilson and you're giving way to Jaylen Wright in the run game. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Buffalo Bills go about trying to attack. And you mentioned the guys up front, Rousseau, Miller, Ed Oliver, dropping guys back into coverage, everyone finding their spot in the zone, keeping everything in front, and just relying on these four guys, Daquan Jones included in that trio as well, and then the guys who come in the rotation to apply quick, consistent pressure on Tua, get arms up, bat balls. To me, that seems like probably the most logical way the Buffalo Bills will try to approach this football game.
I agree, and I think we'll find out pretty early on, right, if that's
Mhm.
effective or not, and Epinesa in that mix as well. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to decide early on, I think, in this game is, are you effectively getting pressure with those 4, or are you gonna have to bring guys like Terrell Bernard down on some blitzes? If so, that could open up the middle of the field, but again, I think where that's going to hurt potentially the Bills is if you have guys like Tyreek coming across the field, right? I
Mhm.
don't think it's going to hurt you as much on the boundary as it will over the middle of the field, vacating that space, right? If you have to bring pressure with linebackers or even safeties. So I think the Bills will be hoping that they can get home with 4, getting those hands up. One thing that's really, again, to the Bills' advantage is even if they can't get home, and like it's going to be hard to sack Tua anyway because he gets the ball out so quickly. Rousseau and Epinesa's length and getting their hands up in those passing lanes is going to be huge. And we saw Epinesa do that last year against the Dolphins. We saw Rousseau do that last year against the Dolphins. So in the absence of getting home and actually sacking Tua, like getting those arms up and getting those hands in the passing lane, that's also going to be really important because I don't expect that they're going to be able to get Tua on the ground a ton,
Mhm.
but they could potentially bat some balls down, which would also be a win for this defense.
Any final thoughts on the Buffalo Bills defense as they try to attack or stymie this Miami Dolphins offense?
I think Dorian Williams last week, he had a pretty solid game, and Cam Lewis, I think, came
Mhm.
in and played admirably. I think with another week of preparation, knowing that Cam Lewis is going to be getting a ton of playing time tonight, I think that helps. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Cam Lewis in the middle of the field tonight. I think there's going to be pressure on Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams to make tackles in the open field on guys like Achane and even Jeff Wilson,
Mhm.
and we'll see about Jaylen Wright, but the Bills have to be a little bit better tackling than they were last week. A couple slip missed tackles. This has always kind of been stylistically where their weakness has been, because of the way that they play. But sure tackling tonight is going to be at a premium, especially if that field's a little soggy. You need to make sure that footing is good, and you need to bring these speedy skill position players of the Dolphins down when you have the chance.
All right. Now, halfway through our pregame here, it is time for our pre-game superlatives. Now, every week we're going to try our best to bring on a guest picker, kind of sort of a college game day sort of homage. And every week we're going to bring on somebody new to do our superlatives with us, but this is a short week. And so it was difficult to find a guest this week. Both you and I feel like we logged off our post game and now we're logging into our pregame. So no chance to book a guest picker. So the guest picker this week is you guys in the comments section. So make sure you're bringing the heat in the comment section, playing this superlatives game along with us. And we're going to start, as always, with That's right. We're starting with our Take Me Higher player of the game. This is the one player, one star player for the Buffalo Bills that really needs to elevate their game in order for the Buffalo Bills to take home a dub tonight. Dave, who is your Take Me Higher player of the game?
I think this guy is going to have to be involved in a ton of plays, whether it's if the Bills do need the blitz, I'm going defense tonight, or whether it's covering the middle of the field. I think Terrell Bernard needs to take the team higher tonight. Looking at last week's game, you could obviously make a good case for Gregory Rousseau going back to Miami where he played his college football, coming off the 3 sacks. He's going to need to have a big game, but I'm going Terrell Bernard, the center of that Bills defense, literally in the middle linebacker position, going to need to be a sure tackler in the run game, likely going to need to roam the middle of the field. Do we see a classic Terrell Bernard interception in this game with Tua trying to go over the middle of the field? I would love to see that. I think Terrell Bernard needs to have an impact game tonight, although he played solidly last week. Didn't talk about him a ton. I think tonight we need to be talking about him a ton in the positive, and so I'll say Terrell Bernard on the defensive side of the ball is the take me higher player.
Charles G agrees with you. He says Terrell Bernard. EB comes in with an interesting one. He says the 12th man. Buffalo always takes over Hard Rock Stadium. Interesting to see if they can still do it on a short week. It'll be interesting to see how much of Bills Mafia traveled out to South Beach on a short week. And then we got obviously Jorge De La Rua coming in saying Josh Allen is the player of the game. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, we're not allowed to say Josh Allen. Jorge can say Josh Allen. We are not allowed to pick Josh Allen because that's sort of a given. Automari comes in, says Ed Oliver. And yeah, those interior pressures on Tua, I think, are going to be key as well. Spin 0481 echoes that sentiment as well, saying the DTs need pressure up the middle. My take me higher player of the game. I honestly didn't even change my notes from last week. I didn't change a word. It's James Cook. It's James Cook. Last week he came up 47 yards short of my prediction. This week he is going to make my prediction come to fruition. 150 all-purpose yards and a touchdown today from James Cook. And again, just like last week, this is more of a commentary on the Buffalo Bills offensive line. Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins were getting so much love this week, even from national people. Just the way they were able to get out and block against the Arizona Cardinals. Yes, the offensive line had their struggles. It was the first week, right? There were some false starts, etc. But I think that line is just going to continue to gel. And as long as they stay healthy, are going to be an absolute weapon for us this year. They don't get talked about enough. When people talk about sort of the demise, the national media talks about the demise of the Buffalo Bills. This offense isn't what it used to be because Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs are gone. They don't talk enough about how the Buffalo Bills offensive line is starting to become a unit that can dictate the way games are played. And not every team in the National Football League can talk about having an offensive line like the Buffalo Bills do. So I'm going to go with James Cook, but it's the guys in front of him who should be getting all the love as my take me higher player of the game. Up next, wild card. All right, we've already had a couple of people come in and say Mac Hollins get himself a 100-yard receiving game, book it. That's the kind of thing we're looking for here in the wild card, right? Player of the game. Who is one surprise player, non-star player who steps up their game today and helps the Buffalo Bills get a victory against the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, this one, I went defense on Take Me Higher, so I'm going to go offense on the wild card, and I'm going to say Dawson Knox. I think that, he's had some nice games against the Dolphins in the past. I think that you may see a lot of 12 personnel tonight, as you mentioned, with James Cook running the ball. You'll see a lot of Kincaid and Knox on the field at the same time. I almost went Ray Davis here, but I think with me saying I expect Cook to get over 18 carries earlier, So I'll kind of like stick to my guns there, and I'll go with Knox. And I think that maybe Knox finds the end zone tonight as well. And so I think with the 12 personnel, Bills maybe running some play action out of that, you'll see Knox on the field. And the Jags did a good, or the Dolphins did a good job containing Evan Ingram last week, but Evan Ingram was really the one-man show at tight end for the Jags. They didn't have to contend with both Kincaid and Knox, so I could see Knox maybe slipping through and getting a touchdown in this game.
We got Johnny Mack coming in saying Rasul Douglas, like that one. William Trout coming in saying Ray Davis, 65 and a tutter.
That's more of a hot take, I feel like, but hey.
Josh Clark coming in saying Dorian Williams, interception, a forced fumble. Spin coming in saying Coleman, 75 yards and a touchdown. Ola Fubb coming in with always my favorite, saying the one who knocks. He is the one who knocks. I'm going to do the opposite of you. You went defense, offense. I'm going to go offense to defense here. I'm going with two guys. I'm going with Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin. The Buffalo Bills need to protect the over the top so that guys like Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle cannot create those explosives down the field. They still need to be mindful of the fact that Miami, through the screen game and through just the underneath stuff, can also create explosives in the underneath. So Taylor Rapp, DeMar Hamlin, they're going to have their hands full in this game trying to give us some semblance or reproduce some semblance of what Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer have given the Bills for so many years. It'll be interesting to see if those two are up to the task. Now, it is time for our Respect You Player of the Game. All right. We have to give Miami credit sometimes. So who is one player? And there is a ton to choose from, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Who's one player from the Miami Dolphins the Bills got to respect in this game if they want to get that dub?
Yeah, I mean, you got to respect Poyer, right, for his fact that he knows the playbook. But I'll go a different direction. I think, look, like hobbled or not, it's Tyreek's the obvious answer. Like you have to respect him. Like there's no reason to even. He's like kind of in the Josh Allen category. Like that's a given. And really Waddle is a given too. But I'm gonna say Devon Chan, even with a hobbled ankle, like 76 receiving yards against the Jags. Saw James Conner have a little success in the receiving game for the Cardinals. The Bills did a pretty good job on him for the most part, but this is a different animal. We've seen Achane have success in that Week 18 game against the Bills last year. He could give the Bills problems on the perimeter if they're not tackling well tonight. And so I will say, even with Mostert out, Achane is a guy you have to respect. They gave him goal line carries too last week against the Jags. So they're not going to be afraid to use him. They might limit him tonight if his ankle is bothering him. And who knows, this could all become moot if he's inactive. But I expect that he will be active, and the Bills definitely need to respect Devon Achane.
Yeah, Hill, Waddle, Achane, their speed, it's all a given. You got to respect it. So I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to go with what Charles G has to say here. Holland is a stud, and Roy Collins comes in and says Javon Holland. Anyone who followed us back when we were with Buffalo Fanatics, that Gregory Rousseau draft class, I was pounding the table for Javon Holland with that pick at the end of the first round. And people were giving me a hard time saying Javon Holland was not a first rounder. And I was pretty adamant. I have loved Javon Holland's game for a long time. You know how much both of us love those Oregon DBs here on the Air Raid Hour. So Javon Holland, not only is he just an extremely gifted football player, he now has Jordan Poyer in the room, right? Like we saw, I mentioned in the postgame show this week, like just the effects that I think Von Miller mentally is having on Gregory Rousseau. And you see some things from Gregory Rousseau you may never have seen, parts of his game develop that may have never developed without Von Miller here. I think Javon Holland's going to get that same boost from having such a savvy veteran in Jordan Poyer next to him for at least this year. So I'm going to go with Javon Holland. Not only is he an extremely talented football player, he's got Jordan Poyer chirping in his ear exactly what the Buffalo Bills are going to do all week. So I'm going to go with Javon Holland as my Respect You Player of the Game. And that leads us to our big time hot take prediction. All right. The goal here with our hot take of the week, our fire sale hot take of the week, is to be as spicy as possible. Clip these and make us look stupid for how hot and spicy these takes are and probably how wrong they will be. Dave, what is your hot take of the weekend? In the comment section, is up with your hot takes for this game.
Yeah, my hot take for tonight is James Cook over 100 rushing and over 75 receiving.
Woo. 25
I
higher
think
than me, man.
yeah. Look, I think he's getting over 20 carries. I think he's
Mhm.
going to be the focal point of this offense. We saw again, I think Ray Davis will get, a bigger role as the season goes on, but if you're talking about a guy who can control this game like we did, he had that sneaky 19 carries last week. It didn't feel like it, but he did. And
Mhm.
I think he can be in store for a big game. We saw the Jags have success running the ball with Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne last week. Um, Ultimately, James Cook has to be that guy for the Bills this year. Etienne had only 2
Mhm.
catches out of the backfield last week, but the Jags as a team only had 12 receptions or 12 completions, I should say. So therefore 12 receptions total. So, 10% of those receptions going to
Mhm.
the running backs. James Cook going to break a big one through the air as well tonight. So over 100 rushing and over 75 in the air.
Roy Collins comes in and says his hot take is a Kingsley Jonathan tip pass interception. Spin, as always, brings the humor, says Tyler Bass doesn't mess up a kickoff. And Josh Clark says, okay, no, never mind. Now I say Dorian Williams with an interception and a forced fumble. Ola Fubb coming in saying Josh Allen 3 rushing tutties today. I think I'd prefer Josh Allen's touchdowns to come through the air with the hand being the way it is. But, I'll take Josh Allen touchdowns anyway. I can get Josh Allen's touchdowns. He is 36 away from 40 for those of you keeping track, by the way. He is 4 touchdowns in, and we are only 1 week into the season. My fire sale, my hot take this week, John Helmkamp, our guy John Helmkamp, had a nice little statistic. He said, hey, Gregory Rousseau is 2 sacks away from tying Bruce Smith for the record to open the season through the first 2 games in terms of sacks. Bruce Smith had 5 sacks through 2 games in one of the seasons he played for the Buffalo Bills, and that is the record. Gregory Rousseau breaks that record tonight with another 3-sack performance against Tua and the Miami Dolphins. That is my hot take of the game. And that leads us now to our final superlative. We're going to paint a picture here for you, our pre-game predictions. All right, Dave, take us back to the future. How's this game look for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, so putting all these superlatives together that I've built up over the course of this show, right? The James Cook over 20 carries, or over 19,
Mhm.
what 20, we'll say over 20. The 100 on the ground, the 75 receiving, the Bills having Terrell Bernard as their take me higher player, helping to stuff that run and be a factor in the passing game. Dawson Knox being a wild card. I think it all adds up to the Bills. Finally, from the start, I would say at the end of the game, they led the Cardinals in time of possession, but I'm going to say that it's a pretty even time of possession throughout the course of this game. Bills have their fair share of success on offense. I think the Dolphins do too. But I do think ultimately the Bills will be able to stop the Dolphins' ground attack with a hobbled Achane and no Mostert enough to keep the Dolphins sort of in that 17 to 20 point range like they were a week ago against the Jags in prime conditions, right? Weather was perfect last weekend, and the Bills do enough on offense, control the clock on the ground. Josh Allen, adds a couple touchdowns like he always will, and the Bills end up winning this game 24-20. Tight game throughout, and at the end they pull it out 24-20. Actually, I'll say 23-20. Gonna be 3 Bass field goals in there and 2 touchdowns.
Charles G in the comment section says 8chan is active tonight.
Oh, there you go.
I'm gonna go, and before we log off here, it's right about that time in the next minute or so. The Buffalo Bills are going to be announcing their inactive list, so we can actually discuss that to close out the show today. My prediction is I think both teams are going to probably try to keep it on the ground, try to keep things underneath a ton. Obviously, Miami will try to take their shots. Whether they can actually hit them with the way the Buffalo Bills decide to defend is another thing. So I think both teams are probably going to try to milk the clock a little bit, control the clock, especially being a short week, Thursday night football, right? You want to play mistake-free football. You want to give yourself a chance in the fourth quarter. So I think the score is going to be a little bit lower than people think because of that. So I'm going to go Buffalo Bills 27, Miami Dolphins 24, and we will be anxiously hoping that the Buffalo Bills can stop the Miami Dolphins on the final drive, just like we were last week with the Arizona Cardinals, because the Bills can never make things easy for any of us ever. It is a fact. So that is my prediction here for the Buffalo Bills, 27-24. We got a couple other predictions coming in. Johnny Mack says 23-21. It'll be really interesting to see if Cole Bishop is active tonight. He is playing, says RJ Melville. So I think we officially have, and I'm going to refresh my Buffalo Bills PR page here on Twitter to get the official count here to see who is and is not active for the Buffalo Bills. And we do. We have our inactives. It is Taron Johnson. It is Buffalo Joe Andreessen. It is Edifon Ulufucio. It is Javon Solomon. It is Ryan Vandermark. And it is Dwayne Smoot. So Taron Johnson's spot in the secondary will officially be filled by Cole Bishop. Thoughts on the Bills inactive list this week?
I mean, not any surprises to me, right? Once we knew Taron Johnson was out, I thought it was a really good chance that we could see Cole Bishop active for this week, and all the other guys on that list were inactive last week. So not a ton of surprises there. I think it's exactly as I expected.
I'm going to look up the Dolphins inactives here real quick. I thought there might have been a chance that the Buffalo Bills try to call up or try in some way, shape, or form to fit in another linebacker, but they did not. So that's interesting. But you're right. There's literally not a single surprise on here. It's the same guys as last week. And then on top of that, Cole Bishop just slides into that Taron Johnson spot. Whether Cole Bishop is utilized on defense or just is utilized on special teams is another thing to track here. And the inactive list for Miami is out. Ethan Bonner, their corner, Raheem Mostert, Channing Tindall, Mo Kamara, Andrew Mayer, and Malik Washington. So the other questionable player, Elijah Campbell, the corner, is playing, and Devon Achane is playing as well. So not too many shockers there for the Miami Dolphins. Everything we've just talked about, nothing gets flipped on its head this evening as the Buffalo Bills and Miami Dolphins play with the expected players they were going to play with.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Miami has Achane active, knowing they have a little break here, means that he's probably closer to being more healthy than not. I would venture.
Sprained ankle on a 4 days rest is crazy to me.
Right, that's why I'm saying like he must be healthier than he must be pretty healthy to be able to go tonight, especially with the field maybe being a little sloppy.
Drugs are a hell of a thing, though.
They are a hell of a thing because you would have thought that potentially they would have been comfortable with Jeff Wilson leading the way. He's a vet, but maybe they definitely wanted. Maybe who knows? Maybe Achane won't even play that much.
A decoy, so, right? Yeah. I mean, he's a guy whose game is built 100% off of his speed, and he's playing with sprained ankle. So it'll be interesting to see how effective he can even be. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We will be back literally tomorrow. We're going to be doing our post-game show tomorrow, 1 hour earlier at 8 p.m. There is still an hour and a half until kickoff. So if you joined us late, you're more than welcome to rewind and check out the top of the show. If you know anyone who would be interested in this pregame show, you think they might like it, first of all, smash that like button. That'll help us get in front of more eyeballs. Always appreciate that. And then we always appreciate hitting that little share button, texting, emailing friends, family, anyone you think would enjoy this Air Raid Hour pregame. We totally could not do the show without you guys and your support. We love the comments every week, and we'd appreciate that support via the text chain as well.
Yeah, and we have over 200 people watching on YouTube right now, and that's awesome heading into this pregame. We've just, like you said, got an hour and a half to go, so hopefully some people who missed the show early, still driving home from work or what have you, will be able to have time to catch the replay. And so thank you all so much. I am anxious for this game. I don't feel the best, but this is just how it goes when we play the Dolphins.
I've been so busy and I've been so go this week that like the nerves haven't had a chance to hit me yet. They're going to hit me about the second after I hit this end stream button. So not looking forward to that, but Don't forget, after the Bills game, you have the Cover One Buffalo post-game show with Greg and Aaron and Anth. You're not going to want to miss that. They absolutely killed it. They crushed it last week. They're going to crush it again this week. Thank you guys so much. Always appreciate your support. See you tomorrow night. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!